And so often what I'm saying to counteract that rebellion and disobedience is, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. And the fact that the law, and I don't find that to be negative parenting at all, in the sense that the law itself given by God is framed largely in the negative. Okay? Now, let's continue on here. The life and teachings of Jesus are largely a what kind of perspective? A positive perspective on morality. For example, John chapter 13, verse 15. Jesus says, I have given you an example. But watch this, that you also should do just as I have what? Notice that he puts it in the positive. He doesn't say, I've given you an example that you should not do the same things that I did not do. Do you see that? He says, I've given you an example so that you should do what I have done. And so in the law we have thou shalt not. In the life of Jesus we have thou shalt. So both the negative and the positive perspectives on morality. Now, again, this is not entirely negative. Neither is this entirely positive. There were a great many things that Jesus did not do that he would recommend to us not to do. But generally speaking, don't do it, do it. Okay? This is sort of our tutor. This is our example. Okay? Does this make sense, everyone? Okay, Jesus did not abrogate the law. Quite the contrary, he intensified and magnified it. Speaking of Jesus' work to come, Isaiah the prophet wrote in Isaiah 42:21, the Lord was pleased for his righteousness' sake to magnify the law and make it glorious. Okay, continuing on then. Can matter be moral? Can matter be moral? What's the answer to that question? The answer is no. Can you imagine telling a chair it ought not break when someone sits on it? Or a tire that it ought not blow while someone is driving the car? That should be car. Sound silly? It is. But if all people are is matter, over which they have no control, as we learned in our last theme, that was Anthony's question, why then should we expect them to act morally? Can hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen act morally? The answer is self-evidently no. In an impassioned fundraising letter, Amnesty International Executive Director John Healy wrote the following words, quote, I am writing you today because I think you share my profound belief that there are indeed some what? Moral absolutes. When it comes to torture, to government-sanctioned murder, to, quote, disappearances, there are no lesser evils. These are outrages against what? All of us. Now, I want you to notice what he says. He's writing here to try and raise awareness and money for Amnesty International, and they do a great work, and I wouldn't deny that. But it's a little odd what he says here. He says people are being, okay, this is fascinating. I want you to really get this, and we'll take a break after this. He says people are being murdered inappropriately, tortured, I shouldn't even say inappropriately, government-sanctioned murder, they're being tortured, and disappearances. Now, who do you suppose is perpetrating these acts? Fundamentally, who's perpetrating these acts? Okay, not just the government, but people. Make sense? So people are perpetrating these acts. Now, John Healy is writing a letter, and he says, I think you share my profound belief that there are some moral what? Absolutes. But watch how he closes the paragraph. He says, when it comes to these things, torture, government-sanctioned murder to disappearances, there are no lesser evils. Look at this last sentence. It is a telling sentence. These are outrages against who? Who's his standard? Yeah, the only what's the word that doesn't, what's the word, not in that sentence, in that last sentence, what's the word that you're going to really struggle justifying? Yeah, how about the word all? Right? These are outrages against all of us. Well, apparently they're not outrages against those people who are carrying out those acts. Make sense? So when he says these are outrages against all of us, what's he appealing to as his standard? He's appealing to a consensus of people that share his opinion and perspective. Okay? But what about the people over on this side who don't share his perspective? They could just as easily write a letter that says, we believe in government-sanctioned murder, torture in appropriate circumstances, and disappearances. And it is our profound belief that there are, in fact, no moral absolutes, and people who say such things are advocating that which is outrageous to all of us. So the question is, whose us should we believe? Should we believe John Healy's us, or should we believe the us of those that are carrying out these acts? Do you see the inconsistency in the statement itself? Do you see it? Okay, because he says these are moral absolutes, which means that they're not only true for him. What's he implying? Who else are they true for? They're true for those that are carrying them out, but then when it comes time for him to justify, and I'm not picking on John here, people do this all the time, I don't know the man, but when it comes time to justify his absoluteness in morality, what does he appeal to? He appeals to consensus. What'd you say, Jim? Yeah, he appeals to humanism. He appeals to what all of us. In other words, he's writing to people that share his perspective, and he's saying, these are absolute because we all have this perspective. Well, newsflash, my friend, not everyone shares your perspective. Are you tracking with me? Now, here, this is beginning to answer Leah's question. How do we justify our second premise there? Objective moral values do exist. How do we justify it? And the point is, basically everyone believes in objective moral values at some level. And Healy's inconsistency here demonstrates this. He knows that government-sanctioned murders are wrong. He knows that disappearances are wrong. He knows that torture is wrong. The problem is he can't justify the absolute wrongness of it with his foundation. He has not moored morality in something that is transcendent enough to include not only his constituency, but the people that he's trying to save, or not save, but the people that he's trying to save the victims from. Making sense? So we can begin to see that objective moral values do exist, and they exist intuitively. They exist intuitively. Now, someone's going to say, no, you can't say that because there's lots of different value systems, different cultures value different things, etc. Okay, let me try and explain to you something that I find to be very fascinating. We'll close with this. C.S. Lewis uses this illustration. I modify it somewhat, but I find it to be very persuasive. Okay. Language is arbitrary. Language is what, everyone? Largely arbitrary. And we're going to demonstrate that arbitrariness here in this classroom. We're going to take a word, and that word is chicken. Chicken. Okay? Do we all know what a chicken is? I'm looking to my non-English speaking Martin, you know what a chicken is? Piece of cake. Okay. So, Martin, you're from Latvia. Language, what's your native language? Latvian? And how do you say chicken in Latvian? Okay, spell it for me. Like that? And on A put like this? No. Like this? This. Okay. And pronounce it for us again? Tsāles. Let's all say that together. Tsāles. Okay, you just learned a word in Latvian. Okay. South African. Do we speak Afrikaans? Yes. Okay. Afrikaans. Chicken. Huner. Okay. Huner. I don't know how to spell it. Okay, but how do you think it might be? Say it again. Huner. So it kind of sounds N-E-R? Huner. Yeah, because it's very similar to, okay, it's almost like German. Okay, so then what other languages do we have here? Yeah. Chuk. Oh, yeah, that's Australian. Okay. Okay, very good. Is that C-H-O-O-K? Chuk. Okay. Okay, what other languages do we have represented here? Oh, Spanish. Pollo. 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 Okay, looking for a Norwegian. What is it? Oh, good luck with that one. Okay, spell it for me. Okay, and say it again for us. Killing? Killing. Okay, let's all say that together. Killing. Killing. Let me tell you, I love the Norwegian language because there's such a music to it. Yeah, I just love it. There's such a melody to it. I love it. I've got a good friend who lives in Sweden. His name is Klaus Nebo. I love him. I love his ministry. He runs a great ministry called Lifestyle TV, very worthy of your support. Several of our graduates are working with him, and they basically broadcast Christian programming in Scandinavia. And whenever Klaus is up front, he has tremendous enthusiasm. I just love the man. I love his wife, Teresa, as well. But he'll be doing his thing, and then he'll always say lifestyle TV in English. So rather than sort of, I guess, translating it into Swedish. And so I do a little impersonation of Klaus, and it's always something like this. It's like he'll be up front, and he'll be really making an impassioned plea for lifestyle TV, and he'll be saying, Hamse hörn lifestyle TV, Hamse hörn lifestyle TV, Hamse hörn lifestyle TV. I just love it. I just absolutely love the lifestyle TV. So anyway, that's the only Scandinavian word I know is lifestyle TV. Okay, so we've got healing. Okay, what do we have in Dutch? Okay, spell it for me there, Yaida. K-P. K-I-P. Is that it? Is that all the languages? Oh, what is it? Does anyone know French? P-O-U-L-E-T. P-O-U-L-E-T. Is that right? Poulet? Poulet. What is it? Gallina? Is that in Spanish? Oh, that's just another term. Yeah, pollo is like the chicken you eat, isn't it? Gallina. Gallina. Okay, we're going to go with pollo. Okay, just because I don't want to write it up there. Anyone else? Surely we have another language. What is it? Kurints? Kuritsa. And how do you spell it? Do you know? Do your best. S-T-A? Koritsa? I should know it in Romanian. I should. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead. What do you have it? In Surinamese? Okay, spell it for me. F-O-W? Foru. Okay. Now, can you imagine if we had Tagalog? And what do you have? You have another one? Oh, what? What is it? Spell it? H-U. Hun. Okay, now I want you to take a look at all these different words. And I want you to understand that every one of these words describes the same thing. Okay? Right? Pollo, chicken. Sals. Huner. Chuk. Or that'd be chuk. 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 Healing. Kip. Poulet. Poulet. Koritsa. Koritsa. Fauru. And hun. Hun. Okay. Now, here's the point. Don't miss this. The fact that we have so many different languages here that represent the same thing shows that language in this sense is arbitrary. Okay, do we understand what we mean by that? That we call a chicken this. For example, in the English language, we call a chicken, but there's nothing that requires that we call a chicken a chicken. The object is not required to be called a chicken by the object. We could have just as easily called a chicken a duck and a duck a chicken. And if you were raised up thinking that a duck was a chicken and a chicken was a duck, you would never question it. You'd never get to be 17 years old and say, you know what, I think we're wrong about that. I think that's really the chicken and that's really the duck. And this is evinced by the fact that in different languages, we attach totally different linguistic labels, nomenclatures, to objects. Does that make sense? And what this shows us is that language is largely arbitrary, that a certain nomenclature is attached to an object, but another nomenclature could have been chosen. In fact, if someone in this room decided to play a trick on us, that they were the only one in the room that knew a particular language, they could say, oh yes, in whatever, Slovenian, it's hnsknek, or whatever. They could just, they could make something up, and who would know? Because there's nothing in the object that demands that it be called something. Which is why there are certainly different language classes. You have your Romance languages, you have your Slavic languages, you have your Saxon languages, etc. No one denies that. But the fact that you have across the whole of the world all of these different languages that will call things different names tells you that there's not a scarlet thread that binds all languages together because they are arbitrary. Make sense? Now follow this and we'll close with this, but don't miss the punchline. You've paid attention up to this point. Here's the punchline. If moral systems were truly arbitrary and relative, we would expect different cultures' moral systems to be as divergent as their linguistic systems. Right? But the reality is that we find, even though we have variations on themes, many cultures share, in fact, you could say in some instances that all cultures share some basic moral consistencies and values. Let me share with you just a couple of them. In no culture that I'm personally aware of, or that I've ever read about or heard about, is it considered honorable to treat with cruelty those that have treated you with hospitality and kindness. Make sense? So show me a culture where it's considered honorable to treat cruelly those that have treated you with hospitality and kindness. Make sense? You might even be able to make a case that that is true morally across all cultures. Are you tracking with me? In most cultures, now I'm going to most, transitioning to most. Let me do another all. I am not aware of any culture where cowardice in battle is honorable and valued. Okay? And maybe we could just do a little test here. In Latvia, is it considered honorable to flee from battle? No. Is cowardice valued? No. How about in Norway, Scandinavia? Cowardice. To be a coward, to be a chicken. Is it valued in to flee, to run away from a battle? No? Okay. How about in any other cultures here? Certainly not the Australian culture, man. Rugby, are you kidding me? They run into the battle. Okay. So any other cultures here? Okay. Hispanic culture, is that considered? Never. No, never, he says. Of course not. So, and there's a few here. Hey, let's keep, whoa, let's keep it down here. We don't want any Australia, New Zealand battles breaking out. Keep yourself. Okay, don't spit the dummy, okay? So in most cowardice in battle, in a time of war, most cultures do not, most cultures look negatively on rape. Most cultures look negatively on rape. Most cultures look negatively on marital infidelity. Now, someone's going to say, no, because in certain cultures you can have more than one wife, and other cultures only one wife. But listen, follow this. This is a very good case in point that though the manifestation may be different, the theme is the same. In a culture where you can only have one wife and a culture where you can have more, is fidelity valued in this culture? Yeah. Fidelity to your wife, is it valued in this culture? Yeah, surely it is. Is fidelity to your wives valued in this culture? Yeah, likely it is. Almost certainly it is. So notice, here you have variations on a theme. Here's one wife, here's multiple wives, but in both instances, fidelity is valued. Are you tracking with me? So what we're trying to say here is that if moral systems were really just totally made up randomly by different cultures, and, well, you can't tell this culture to value that moral system, and that culture can't tell this culture, basically we are agreeing that there are variations on a theme, and some cultures do have some practices that I would say are immoral. I'm not saying all cultures are always moral. What I'm saying is we shouldn't expect there to be any moral consistencies, much less the many moral consistencies that we do see transculturally, if in fact morality was truly as arbitrary as linguistic systems and linguistic labels. Does that make sense? And this argues strongly for the fact that everyone knows intuitively, getting back to Leah's question, that there is some moral standard, some moral basis. And I would argue that that consistency, that transcultural consistency that we see in morality is rooted in the fact that we all know intuitively that we were made in the image of God, that we are inherently valuable, and that others are inherently valuable. Now, does that mean we can't come up with an Adolf Hitler or an Idi Amin or a Mao Zedong? No, those people are usually anomalous to their culture and operate outside of their culture, not always, but often. The point is this: we should not expect to see these kinds of moral consistencies if, in fact, morality was truly arbitrary and just tied to the caprice of given cultures. Do you see the point, everyone? Yes or no? Does that make sense? Great, fantastic. We're going to take a break, but before we do that, we'll, do you have a question there, Simon? Okay. Simon says the fact that we would say that one culture is more moral. Well, that's obviously what John Healy's doing, isn't he? He's saying my culture that says government-sanctioned murders, disappearances, and tortures is inappropriate is more moral than the culture that says it is. He makes the philosophical mistake of appealing to all. These are outrages against all of us. But you're right. But what we're going to see in our next class is that we even have to be careful evaluating other cultures. In a materialist universe, you cannot how can culture A evaluate culture B? Because what standard do you use to evaluate that culture? Do you use culture A's standard or culture B's standard? And what Simon is saying, well, there appears to be a standard that we evaluate all cultures by. And I think you're right. I think you're right. Okay, Jim. Okay, if it's too hard, we'll take it at the beginning of the next class. But you... The question that Dr. Kamazi is asking is, that all sounds good, you know, theistic values, etc., but what about these instances of genocide in the Old Testament? That doesn't strike us now as particularly moral. Great question. We will take that up in our next, we'll take it up right at the beginning of our next, try and take it up at the beginning of our next class here.